The clock on the dining room wall ticked with the same stubborn rhythm it had kept for 20 years. Every tick reminded Mira of time she couldn't get back, the years she had spent stitching school uniforms at midnight, skipping meals so her daughter could eat, and smiling through the kind of exhaustion only single mothers truly understood. Now, as she stood in her daughter's marble-floored dining room, she realized that time had finally turned its back on her. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is," Elena said, crossing her arms. Her tone carried the sharp impatience of someone used to being obeyed. "Rohan just wants some respect in his own house. That's not too much to ask, is it?" Mira looked at her daughter, the little girl she had once carried on her back through monsoon rains to get her to school, now standing tall in a silk blouse and diamond earrings. Her eyes were cold. "Respect," Mira repeated softly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her hurt. "Do you think I've ever disrespected anyone under this roof?" Before Elena could answer, a voice echoed from the living room. "Elena," Rohan called out, "tell your mother if she wants to stay here, she needs to start earning her keep. This isn't some charity." Mira closed her eyes. The humiliation settled deep in her chest like a stone. Rohan appeared in the doorway, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, a glass of whiskey dangling from his fingers. He looked at Mira, the way one looks at an unwanted guest, polite enough to conceal disdain. "You see, Ma," he began, mockingly emphasizing the title, "Elena and I are trying to build a certain lifestyle. Having you here, well, it doesn't quite fit the image, you understand. I only cook and clean because I can't sit idle," Mira said quietly, "not because you asked me to." Rohan smirked. "Then consider this official. From now on, if you want to live here, you'll do what we ask, serve tea when I come home, keep the place spotless, handle the groceries, the laundry. You can call it rent." Elena's eyes darted between them, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mom, please, don't make a scene." A silence settled in the room, thick, suffocating. Mira felt the weight of every word unsaid pressing down on her throat. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, stripped of any trace of pleading. "Elena, do you remember the old house by the river, the one your father and I built before he passed?" Elena frowned. "Of course, it's barely standing anymore. I remember." Mira said softly, "How you cried when we had to sell it. You said you'd build me a new one someday, where I'd never have to lift a finger again." Elena shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, that was years ago. Things change." Mira smiled, not bitterly, not sadly, but in the calm way of someone who has just made a decision they should have made long ago. "Yes," she said, "they do." She turned and walked toward her small room at the end of the hallway. Inside, everything was neatly folded and organized, the way she kept her life, even when the world around her was in chaos. Her suitcase was old, its corners frayed, but it had been ready for years. Perhaps some part of her had always known this day would come. She packed slowly. 2 saris, a sweater, her late husband's photograph, and a small diary tied with a faded red ribbon. She glanced once around the room, her gaze lingering on the window through which morning light used to stream, the same window where she had once watched her daughter leave for school with mismatched socks and a grin too wide for her little face. When she returned to the living room, suitcase in hand, Rohan was laughing at something on his phone, barely looking up. Elena stood by the kitchen counter, tears glistening in her eyes but pride sealing her lips. "Where are you going?" Elena whispered. Mira placed a gentle hand on her daughter's cheek. "Where I'm respected, Beta, and where I don't have to earn the right to exist." "Mom, don't be dramatic," Elena said, though her voice cracked. "You know how hard Rohan is working to keep this house. We just need peace." Mira nodded. "Peace," she echoed, her smile soft but final. "You'll have all the peace you want." Without another word, she lifted her suitcase, walked to the front door, and stepped out. The evening air hit her face like a release, cool, unfamiliar, and liberating. For the first time in years, she wasn't walking toward someone's need. She was walking toward her own silence. As she reached the gate, a soft drizzle began to fall. Mira paused, looking up at the sky. The raindrops stung her cheeks, or maybe those were tears she hadn't noticed. Behind her, through the rain, she could hear Rohan's voice faintly complaining about dinner, and Alina's soft attempts to pacify him. Mira smiled again, a small, sad smile that carried both heartbreak and quiet strength. She adjusted her shawl, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Enough." Then she walked away, into the rain, into the night, into the beginning of her freedom. The cottage stood at the far end of the old riverside lane half, hidden behind wild bougainvillea and decades of neglect. The wooden gate creaked like a forgotten song as Mira pushed it open. Dust coated the veranda, cobwebs hung like old memories in corners, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth and jasmine, her late husband's favorite scent. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Setting her suitcase down, Mira stood still for a long moment, the silence wrapping around her like a familiar shawl. For the first time in years, no one was calling her name. No one was demanding tea or dinner or quiet obedience. There was only the sound of the river flowing nearby, steady and unjudging. She lit an old kerosene lamp and began sweeping the floor, her movements slow but deliberate. Dust rose like ghosts of her past life, but she didn't flinch. Each stroke of the broom felt like clearing a piece of the pain lodged in her chest. By the time the small room looked somewhat livable, the sun had begun to set. Mira unpacked a simple dinner, a bit of rice, lentils, and a mango pickle she had made months ago. The meal was humble, but as she ate in the dim glow of the lamp, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. The next morning, Mira walked to the local market to buy some vegetables. The shopkeeper, an old friend named Kamla, nearly dropped her weighing scale when she saw her. "Mira, is that really you?" Mira smiled faintly. "It's me, Kamla. I'm back." Kamla hurried around the counter and hugged her tightly. "Arai, you vanished after Elina's wedding. What are you doing here all alone? Where's your daughter?" "She's busy with her new life," Mira said, choosing her words carefully. Kamla looked at her for a long moment and sighed. "You always gave too much, Mira. Some people don't know what to do with that kind of love." Mira smiled again, the quiet, knowing kind of smile that comes from a wound that no longer bleeds but hasn't quite healed either. She returned home with a small basket of vegetables and began tending to the overgrown garden. Day after day, she worked, pruning, painting, mending. Slowly, the broken cottage began to look alive again. In the evenings, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun sink behind the river. Sometimes she wrote in her diary. Other times, she simply listened to the wind, letting it fill the emptiness left behind by the people she had once called family. A week passed, then two, no calls, no messages. She told herself she didn't expect any, and perhaps she didn't. Still, every time her phone screen lit up with a wrong number or a telemarketer, a part of her heart leapt, hoping it was Alina. But silence persisted, so Mira began volunteering at a nearby women's shelter. It was run by a kind, middle-aged woman named Mira Joshi, who greeted her with warmth. The shelter housed women who had been discarded by husbands, by children, by society itself. At first, Mira came only to cook. But slowly, she began listening to their stories, betrayal, neglect, abandonment, each one echoing her own in a different tone. "You're so calm," one of the women told her. "How do you forgive them?" Mira had smiled softly. "Forgiveness isn't a gift for them," she said. "It's how I keep myself from burning with anger." That night, when she returned to her cottage, she found herself staring at her phone again. Still nothing from Alina, but she wasn't angry, not anymore. Instead, a strange clarity was forming in her mind, like a picture slowly coming into focus. She remembered the small share of her late husband's investments, the ones she had quietly let row and used to expand his business. She had trusted him because her daughter had trusted him. But she also remembered how careful she had been, ensuring the documents remained in her name. Perhaps, she thought, There were things Rohan and Alina had forgotten about. Not out of malice, not yet, but out of self-respect. Mira began visiting a lawyer in town, a kind young man named Arvind, who had once been her student. They spent hours reviewing old papers, tracing investments, property shares, and legal ownership. When Arvind looked up from the documents, his eyes were wide. "Mira Jai, do you realize how much of Rohan's company technically belongs to you?" Mira stirred her tea gently, unshaken. "Enough," she said, to remind him that charity works both ways. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She merely folded the papers and tucked them into her bag. Outside, the rain began again, soft, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something awakening. Meanwhile, in the city, Alina's life was beginning to fray at the edges. Rohan came home later each night, temper sharp, excuses sharper. Their home, once filled with glittering parties and polished furniture, felt cold. Alina tried to call her mother a few times, but she would hang up before the call connected. Pride was a powerful prison, and she had built hers carefully. When she finally found the courage to dial again, the call rang and rang, unanswered. Mira was at the shelter, listening to a young girl weep about her husband's cruelty. She held the girl's hands and whispered, "Sometimes, child, walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Her phone buzzed in her bag. 20 seconds later it stopped. She didn't even look. That night she sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across her open diary. She wrote, slowly, deliberately, asterisk, "I left quietly so they could hear the sound of my absence." Asterisk, she closed the diary, blew out the lamp, and lay down, her heart strangely light. In the dark, the phone vibrated once more on the table, another missed call. She didn't move, because sometimes silence speaks louder than any answer ever could. The rains came early that year. In the city, traffic choked under dark skies, and tension simmered behind every shining glass office tower. Rohan's company, Auric Enterprises *, which had once seemed unstoppable, now trembled beneath the weight of rumors. Mira heard about it first from Kamla at the market. "They say your son-in-law's business is in trouble," Kamla whispered, leaning closer over the vegetable stall. "Some big scandal, investors pulling out, accounts frozen. You didn't hear." Mira simply raised an eyebrow, her calm composure unshaken. "No," she said softly, "I didn't." Kamla sighed. "You always said pride doesn't last. You were right, as usual." Mira gave a faint smile but said nothing more. Inside, her heart beat a little faster, not with excitement, but with a quiet sense of inevitability. The wheel of life had begun to turn, and all she had done was step aside to let it. Meanwhile, in the city, Alina was unraveling. Rohan's temper had grown unpredictable, each day a new explosion of anger. The first time, it was about a report that leaked to the press. The second about missing funds. By the third, Alina had stopped asking questions. She watched as he paced their living room, shouting into his phone. "No, listen, the shares were never in my name. I told you we'll fix it. I just need time." He slammed the phone down, shattering a glass in the process. Alina flinched. "What's going on, Rohan?" she whispered. He turned on her, eyes burning. "What's going on? What's going on is that your mother's name is on half the damn company, that's what." Alina froze. "What are you talking about?" She never transferred the investments properly. Rohan spat. "All those funds she put in years ago, I thought we sorted it out, but the papers were never changed. Do you understand what that means? She legally owns 40% of Auric Enterprises *. 40%? Alina's breath caught. "That can't be true, she wouldn't." "Oh, she did." Rohan snapped. "And now the auditors are asking questions. The banks won't release any money until ownership is clarified. We're bleeding cash, Alina. If she doesn't sign those papers, we're finished." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. Alina felt dizzy. The image of her mother standing by the doorway, suitcase in hand, flickered in her mind, that calm smile, that single word, *. Enough. Maybe this was what she had meant. Then we'll talk to her, Elena said quickly. I'll make her understand. She's not cruel, Rohan. She'll help us. Rohan gave a bitter laugh. You think so? You think she'll help the man who threw her out like a maid? She's probably waiting for us to crawl to her. Elena swallowed hard. She's my mother. She'll listen. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, Elena sat on her bed, staring at her phone. The screen glowed faintly in the dark. Her mother's contact name still saved as * Mama read. * Her thumb hovered over the call button for a long time before she finally pressed it. It rang once, twice, then again, no answer. She called again, still nothing. By the 7th call, tears blurred her vision. By the 10th, she was trembling. When she reached the 22nd missed call, she threw the phone onto the bed and covered her face with her hands. The house felt too big, too cold, too silent. Back in the riverside cottage, Mira sat by the window, the lamp flickering beside her. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the world outside smelled of wet earth and renewal. Her phone lay on the table, screen lighting up again and again. She didn't need to check to know who it was. She had waited years for her daughter to need her, not out of love, but out of realization. And now that it had happened, she felt no joy, no satisfaction, only peace. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the warmth fill her chest. Arvind, the lawyer, had come earlier that day. The final paperwork is ready, he'd told her. You can legally reclaim your share of the company's assets. Do you want me to send the notice to Rohan's office tomorrow? Mira had nodded. Yes, she said. Let it be official. She didn't do it out of vengeance. She did it because for too long she had let others use her silence as consent. This was not punishment, it was balance. The next morning, the financial newspapers carried the headline, **, Auric Enterprises under investigation. Major stakeholder withdraws support. **, reporters swarmed the gates of Rohan's mansion. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions, and Elena hid behind drawn curtains. Rohan Malhotra, one reporter shouted, "Is it true your mother, in law pulled her investments? Was the company using her funds illegally?" Another demanded. Rohan's voice thundered from inside. No comments. Elena sat on the staircase, her hands trembling as she watched the chaos through the window. Her phone buzzed again, another call from the bank, another message from investors threatening lawsuits. And through it all, one thought kept echoing in her mind. Mommy warned me. Far away, Mira was at the shelter, helping a young woman fill out job forms. The rain had stopped, and sunlight filtered through the curtains in soft golden stripes. "Thank you, Mira Auntie," the woman said shyly. "You're always so calm. Don't you ever get angry?" Mira smiled gently. "Anger is like a fire child. It burns everything, even the hands that hold it." The woman nodded, her eyes wide with admiration. Mira packed up her things later that afternoon, walking back to her cottage. As she opened the gate, she paused. A car was parked outside, a black sedan she recognized instantly. Elena stepped out, her face pale, eyes red from crying. "Mama," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, we need to talk." Mira didn't move for a long moment. Then she nodded toward the porch. "Come inside, Beta. It's raining again." Elena followed, her expensive heels sinking slightly into the wet ground. Inside, she looked around at the simple furnishings, the old photos on the wall, the clay teacups on the table. It all felt so alive, despite its simplicity. "Mama, I made a mistake," she began, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean what I said that day. Rohan, he was angry, and Mira poured her tea, steady and silent. "Sit down, Elena," she said softly. "Drink something. You look tired." Elena sank into the chair, tears spilling freely now. "We've lost everything, Mama. The company, the house, even Rohan's friends turned against us. They say you're taking everything from us." Mira looked at her daughter quietly, her eyes kind but unreadable. I didn't take anything, Elena. I only took back what was mine. Elena sobbed harder. Please, Mama, help us. We'll start over. Just come home. I'll make Rohan apologize. Mira's hand stilled over her teacup. She looked up slowly, her voice calm but unyielding. Home. She repeated, Elena, I am home. The words hung in the air like truth itself, undeniable, final, liberating. Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time Mira didn't flinch. She simply watched her daughter weep, the way one watches a storm pass, inevitable, destructive, and necessary. That night, long after Elena left, Mira opened her diary and wrote, Asterisk justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers softly, steadily, until the world finally hears. Asterisk she placed the diary on her bedside table, blew out the lamp, and lay back, her heart light with the peace of a woman who no longer owed anyone her silence. The tide had turned, and this time it was carrying her forward. The monsoon had passed, leaving behind air thick with the scent of wet soil and rebirth. The river outside Mira's cottage shimmered in the afternoon sun, gentle ripples catching the light like small pieces of hope. The world, it seemed, had learned to be quiet again, just as she liked it, but peace rarely lasts unbroken. A knock came at the door one evening, soft and hesitant. Mira knew that rhythm instantly. It was the same way Elena used to knock as a child, worried she might disturb her mother's stitching late into the night. When Mira opened the door, she found her daughter standing there again, but this time not in the crisp confidence of a city woman. Her hair was pulled back loosely, her clothes plain, her eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. She looked smaller somehow. Human again, Mama, Elena whispered. May I come in? Mira stepped aside wordlessly. The smell of cardamom tea filled the little house, mingling with the sound of the river outside. Elena looked around, the same simple clay cups, the woven mat, the framed photograph of her father smiling down from the wall. I haven't been here in years, Elena murmured. It feels like stepping back in time. Mira poured her tea and handed her a cup. Some things don't need to change, she said gently. They sat in silence for a long moment. Only the clinking of spoons and the distant hum of crickets filled the air. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice trembling. Mama, everything's gone. Rohan left. He's somewhere abroad, running, I think. There are cases against him now. I'm living in a rented apartment. I don't even know what to do next. Mira listened quietly, her expression soft but unreadable. I wanted to come sooner. Elena continued, but I was so ashamed. I kept thinking of the things I said to you that night, how I made you leave, how I stood there and let him. She stopped, choking on her words. You have every right to hate me. Mira put her cup down and looked at her daughter with calm eyes. I don't hate you, Elena. You are my child. I carried you, raised you, loved you more than my own life. How could I hate you? Elena's tears spilled over. Then why won't you come home? Mira smiled faintly. Because, Beta, I already am home. Elena's gaze dropped to her hands. You're happier without me. I'm at peace, Mira corrected softly. There's a difference. For a while they sat together, the silence no longer heavy but thoughtful. Then Mira stood and walked to her cupboard. She pulled out a thick envelope, sealed neatly. I kept this for you, she said, handing it to Elena. These are the remaining assets from my share of the company. After the debts are cleared, this will be enough for you to start again. I don't want you to live in shame. Elena stared at her mother in disbelief. Mama, no, I don't deserve this. Not after everything I did to you. Mira smiled again, a gentle curve of her lips that carried both love and strength. You're right, you don't, but I'm giving it anyway, because forgiveness is mine to give, not yours to earn. Elena broke down completely then, falling to her knees beside her mother's chair. She clutched Mira's hand, sobbing like a child. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Mira stroked her daughter's hair, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I know, Beta, I know. They talked late into the night about the past, about Elena's regrets, about Mira's quiet life now. There was no bitterness in Mira's tone, only a wisdom carved by pain and patience. When Alina finally rose to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Will you ever come visit me?" Mira thought for a moment, then said softly, "When I feel the world in your home is calm enough to welcome me, I will." Alina nodded slowly. "Then I'll build that kind of home, Mama. One that deserves you." As she walked away into the fading twilight, Mira stood at the doorway watching her go, the same way she had watched her leave for school years ago. Only this time the leaving felt right. A week later, Mira returned to the shelter. She was now more than a volunteer. She was a counselor, a quiet force of empathy for women who had been silenced too long. Word of her story had spread through the small town, and women came to her not just for advice, but for courage. One young woman asked her one day, "Auntie, do you ever wish you had made them suffer more, that you had taken revenge?" Mira smiled as she poured tea for them both. "Child," she said, "revenge is like a stone thrown in water. It makes ripples, yes, but it also sinks you with it. What I wanted wasn't revenge, I wanted freedom." The girl frowned. "But he lost everything." "Yes," Mira said, eyes distant but serene. "That was his doing, not mine." She handed the girl her cup and added softly, "The sweetest revenge is a peaceful life. It hurts those who hurt you because they'll never understand how you found joy without them." Later that night, Mira sat by the window, her diary open once again. The lamplight glowed golden against the pages as she wrote, "My daughter gave me an ultimatum once, serve or leave. I chose to leave not out of defiance, but because I wanted to find the woman I had forgotten to be. A week later, she called 22 times. I didn't answer, not because I didn't care, but because I wanted her to learn silence. In silence, we hear truth." She paused, smiling faintly as she continued, "Now she is learning. Now I am living, and perhaps someday she will too." She closed the diary, placed it beside the lamp, and looked out at the river. The moon hung low and silver, its reflection trembling on the surface, beautiful, unbroken, and whole. The world outside whispered gently, the wind carrying the scent of rain and jasmine once more. Mira felt her husband's presence in that fragrance, his voice in the rustling leaves, and her heart in its calm rhythm. The next morning she received a letter, a real one, handwritten in her daughter's delicate cursive. "Mama, I've moved to a smaller house near the city's edge. It's quiet, and I've started working again. I cook now, the way you used to, with love and patience. I wanted to tell you that I think I finally understand what you meant when you said peace is better than pride. I'm trying to live like that now. Thank you for not abandoning me, even when I abandoned you. One day, when you're ready, please come and see what I've built. It's not much, but it's honest. And I promise no ultimatums, only tea and love. Your daughter, Alina." Mira read the letter 3 times, each time feeling the words settle deeper into her heart. She folded it carefully and placed it in her diary beside her husband's photograph. "See, Ravi," she murmured, looking at the picture. "She's coming home, not to a house, but to herself." And with that, Mira stepped out onto her veranda, the morning sun warming her face. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and smiled a true smile, full of grace and quiet triumph. The river sang softly beside her, carrying away the remnants of pain, leaving only peace behind. For the first time in years, Mira felt completely free, and that, she thought, as the wind played gently with her hair, was the sweetest revenge of all.